Science proves quality sleep is vital to your mental, emotional, and physical health. The Sleep Number 360 smart bed senses your movements and automatically adjusts to help keep you both effortlessly comfortable. And it's temperature balancing, so you stay cool. So you're at your best for yourself and those you care about most. Life-changing sleep, only from Sleep Number. It's our President's Day special. Save 50% on the Sleep Number 360 limited edition smart bed, plus free home delivery when you add an adjustable base. Ends Monday. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for February 19th, 2023. And I am JD Duran. And boy, what a pleasure this is for this conversation. I am joined by the one, the only, the great Tim Costa from the First Time Watchers podcast. Tim, how we doing, my friend?
Well, considering what we're going to be discussing and who we're going to be discussing today, I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Thank you.
I would assume so. We've known each other for quite some time. Obviously, this is the first time you've been here since we have reshifted everything. How do you like our new digs? Welcome to our new home.
It's comfy, although it could use a little bit more Brendan.
You could always use a little bit more Brendan. Brendan is very busy these days.
Indeed.
I don't know if anyone listening or watching to this is aware. He's made this public, so I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but he's engaged. He's planning for a wedding currently, so much to Tim's chagrin, obviously. But he's very busy right now, so it's hard to have him on here all the time like we used to. And I guess that is to say that I agree with Tim. We definitely want more Brendan, but
my heart's broken right now. My heart's broken. he's just crushed into a million pieces, but. At least we could talk about somebody else who has my heart.
Well, yeah, we were going to make up for that, right? Because Brendan couldn't be here, but we are going to be talking about Tim's favorite, Gerard Butler. And let's start there. Let's start with your love affair of Gerard Butler, because you have championed this guy for such a long time. You donated to our Patreon just to force us to watch and review Geostorm specifically. That's how much you are dedicated to this man. and I just still don't think I would have watched that movie unless you did that. So let's start there. When did this start? Has this always been a thing for you? What is it with you and Gerard Butler?
Well, like most things in my life, I don't think things through. And something like this, honestly, it started with Geostorm. With Geostorm. I have a soft spot for disaster films.
Sure.
And I remember the advertisements for that movie, and I was like, this is going to hit the sweet spot. And sure enough, I went to the theater. It was one of very few people in that screening, and had a beer in my hand. And watching this movie, it just, turning my tummy over and letting it rub me the right way, and just fell in love with that movie. And like most things, I tend to exaggerate and be hyperbolic. So I became hyperbolic with that film and my love for the film. On subsequent watches, I still love it because I enjoy it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And it just morphed into some sort of online love affair with Gerard Butler. And honestly, the more films of his I've watched, the more I've appreciated the niche that he's kind of made for himself.
Yeah.
And it's pretty interesting, actually, the last couple of years, how he has the choices that he's made, his decisions in terms of his roles, I think has suited his persona, his on-screen persona well. Mm-hmm. And he's found a nice niche, I think, after the Has Fallen trilogy, this big action star, same with Geostorm, and maybe even something like Den of Thieves. Den of Thieves is more grounded, of course, and a low rent heat, but I think is really successful in what it's doing. And I think ever since the finish of the Has Fallen trilogy in 2019, the last few films of his, have done, I think, have done him pretty well, and I think he's done those movies well.
Yeah, so he's definitely carved out this particular niche that he has, and he has an audience. I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago on the show. I can't remember the context. I do remember in the moment, though, when we were talking about Gerard Butler, that we should have saved that whole conversation to bring you on to have this. I'm glad that we're somewhat regurgitating it here. Because the one interesting thing, and I believe that Jay noted this when we were having that conversation, is that his movies go to theaters. Like, you think about so many others, like Bruce Willis, for example, and unfortunate the news that we heard about him this last week. But you think about him or John Travolta, there's so many actors that are still making movies, but they all go to straight to VOD. And you don't really hear about them very much.
It's true. I like I said, the last few years since Angel Has Fallen in 2019, there was Greenland, which made it to theaters in 2020, I think, as difficult as it was, but found a good home video resurgence. And then once theaters started coming back, there's Cop Shop. Now, you talk about VOD. There was a VOD, kind of straight to video movie that came out last year called Last Seen Alive, which is not a good movie at all. It's not a good movie. Okay. But once again, I'm not going to say he elevated the movie, but he knew what he was in, and it's the type of movie that you would find him in. If a better director, a better screenwriter, if anything worked better in that movie, I think it would have, it could have seen a similar plane trajectory, if you will,
sure.
or maybe even something as kind of like Cop Shop. The Cop Shop's a little bit more ridiculous in nature, but. I think he knows his niche, and he's been riding it well.
And they go to theaters, a lot of these movies. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them go to theaters, and not everyone can say that. So it is real interesting in that way. And the other thing too, and we'll get to this with Plane as well, he has that Nicolas Cage thing of, he doesn't ever phone in a performance. Like, I still find him incredibly magnetic in these movies. Sure. Even when they're terrible, like, he's giving it his all. And I do really appreciate that. That's probably part of the charm and why people still go to watch his movies. So I haven't seen all of them. Like, I didn't watch Angel Has Fallen. I gave up on that franchise after London, and I really did not like the first one either. So
interesting. Okay.
So I gave up on that franchise. Cop Shop I did not see either. So it's one of those things where I do love Gerard Butler as a performer, and I appreciate that he's carved out this little spot for him in the cinema space. But I just haven't had, I have to be real diligent about what I see because my time is already pretty limited. Yep. So I don't always get a chance to see, these movies that I want to. But I did make time for Plane, and thus here we are. So I guess we could transition to that. So this is directed by Jean-Francois Richet. It, of course, stars Gerard Butler, as well as Mike Coulter, Tony Goldwyn, and many others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Plane, it is about a plane. Really, it's about a pilot. Gerard Butler plays a pilot, and one of his planes is in a lightning storm. It gets struck by lightning. They are forced to land in some jungle, and chaos ensues. And I guess we'll just leave it at that. So we'll dive into this, and we'll start with you, Tim. What did you think about his latest in Plane?
Well, I mean, you got to start off with his character's name, Brody Torrance, which is the ultimate action film name. I mean,
Of
it's
course.
great.
Yeah.
It is a chef kiss of character names for this type of movie.
Yeah.
And I don't think it stops there either. Mike
No.
Coulter's name is Louis Gaspar. I mean, he plays somebody who is in the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
Tony Goldwyn's character, he just goes by Scarsdale, and he plays essentially someone who just sits in this situation room trying to get things done from across the globe, and like the fixer, if you will, the Michael Clayton of this plane movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think from the get-go, people know what this movie is, what it's going to be, and I don't think it ever tries to be more than what it actually is, which is its strength. Its strength. I mean, is it a great film? No. Is it a terrible film? Absolutely not. It flies straight and never goes too high, never goes too low, and it's a very entertaining action film. This is something that would have come out in the late 80s, the early 90s, starred somebody like Jean-Claude Van Damme or Wesley Snipes, and would have made $70 million. It would have been a mid-budget film, which this is, and been a moderate hit that would have continued that actor's run for another few years, and it's a shame that this wasn't that big of a hit in the theaters. I think it's going to be something that probably finds a second life on VOD.
Do we know how much this made at the box office? Do you know?
Oh, I don't have it off the top of my head. No, but I just think that it's one of those films that suffers from a variety of issues, whether it's just it doesn't have a huge draw in terms of actor. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's an R-rated movie. It doesn't appeal to a wider audience like a PG-13 movie was, and it's not a franchise film. So it has a lot going against it, but I think once you actually sit down and watch this, it's enjoyable, and it doesn't overstay its runtime. It's pretty efficient. The first act, sets up these everyday people. I think Gerard Butler's character, he plays his everyday person that you're immediately introduced to him talking on his phone to his daughter, that he's like, okay, he has a family, he's a family man, and then you realize, okay, he's a pilot, he's a working day family man, and then you get a little bit of history, like, oh, he was in the RAF, so he has some experience in the military, so he might have some sort of knowledge that will help him in this ridiculous situation that he'll find himself in. Yeah.
Okay. Before I get into my thoughts on the movie, I just want to toss this out there because I did look it up. According to Box Office Mojo, Plane made $47 million worldwide, 31 domestically.
Okay, worldwide. If that was domestic, I would be impressed.
31 domestic.
Okay.
Not the worst. By comparison, Babylon made $15 million domestically. And $56 million worldwide. So it's not like it was a complete failure.
I guess, but that's an odd comparison too.
Because I was trying to think of a movie that came out recently. Maybe I should have looked up something like The Fabelmans. But something that, because the reason I thought of Babylon is that Babylon had an $80 million budget.
Sure.
And garnered $56 million. And to your point, this had a budget of $25 million.
Okay.
So again, it's one of those things where, you have to include some marketing in that, but on the whole, if it lost money, it wasn't too much, and it might have made a little bit of a profit on the whole, and then there's the VOD sales as you're talking about there. So that's for a movie that 30 years ago would have made $70 million at the box office.
Yeah.
By today's standards, I look at those numbers and I go, okay, that's kind of respectable.
Yeah.
When
It's better.
the Babylons and the Fablemans of the world are just losing money left and right.
Especially for a January theatrical release.
And it's a January theatrical release. Absolutely. As far as my thoughts on the film, I do think that on the whole, you do have to walk into this with a certain mindset, because this is the kind of review where if I wanted to, I could walk into this conversation and completely rip apart this script, which is awfully contrived at times and extremely manufactured. But I don't want to do that, because I did enjoy this experience for the most part. And I think what I was surprised by, and I don't know if this is certain biases that come through when you walk into a movie like this, I don't really know. It was a little bit more grounded than I anticipated. Now, it certainly does get rambunctious as the film goes, and especially once they get to that island, for sure. But Gerard Butler's character, and this is an action-y kind of movie, but through a lot of the film, aside from really one fight sequence when he is trying to, he's trying to make this call and he's trying to get some help, and he is attacked from behind and he's forced to defend himself. Outside of that scene, Brody really isn't in the fight all that much.
Sure.
He's a pilot, and he's in charge of his crew, and he's in charge of getting everyone home safely. And that's his priority. That's his main priority. So I do think there's a little bit of a fascinating sleight of hand with this film. You walk in going, especially you see the poster, you see some of the images that they have released publicly before the release of the film. And it does, carry the facade of Gerard Butler action star, and he's in this fight and he's going to be the hero at the end of the day. And he is, but I don't think in the ways that you might anticipate. And I did really appreciate that. And also I think about the flying sequence at the beginning of the film, which is a good 20, 25 minutes of this movie. I don't know how authentic it is, but they do a really good job of hiding whatever contrivances that there are there. It does feel, with the terminology, the lingo, which they don't really explain, it feels as if you're in an actual cockpit, and they give credence to these characters as pilots. And again, that not something that I anticipated necessarily. And they spend a lot of time on it. It's a good 25-minute sequence of them. It's not just the flight itself, right? We are in the plane with them before the passengers are on. So he's doing his checklist with his co-pilot. Yeah. He's talking to the crew. They're going through what a crew would before the passengers are even on. And then of course the passengers have to come on. He's got to make the announcements. Like, they do all of that. I mean, there's 15 minutes of this movie before the plane even takes off.
Yeah, it's actual character development. That you talk about, the going over the checklist with his co-pilot, that actually gets you invested in that character, because he becomes involved in the situation with the guerrillas once they crash land. You have the passengers who, it's nice that the time of day this is set so that you have a limited amount of passengers on the plane. Sure. So that you don't just have fodder for deaths and some other forms of fashion.
Don't have to take care of 200 people.
Right, exactly. But you also have them filled with tropey individuals, tropey characterizations. So it's really amusing once they land on this island, how as they assess what they have and what they don't have, and the crew report to these passengers, the passengers are like, what are you talking about? How can we not? I'm like, you got to be grateful that this dude landed you on this stupid island alive.
Like it gets ridiculous, and that's what I was saying about the script. Like, we could sit here and really rip this thing apart if we wanted to, because it is quite trite and cliche for sure. Very tropey, as you're talking about. And yeah, I mean, the logic to the dialogue often makes no sense, especially with the passenger characters. I also think it's interesting too, because, speaking of the script, there is the Mike Coulter character.
Yes.
Who, as we noted, is, he was a part of the French Foreign Legion. I also think it's hilarious. Maybe this is a slight spoiler, but him being a prisoner on this plane has absolutely there's no reason for it. Like, there's no conclusion. There's no here's something that you really need to know, other than I guess he helps with the fighting a little bit, but it just feels a little unnecessary to me.
He could have easily just been somebody escaping from a previous situation and in hiding, having a hat over his eyes or something like that, and then whatever he's running away from could have been delivered somehow in the script later on, just to give you an idea as to how he is so adept at the fighting and shooting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, where it's perhaps a little excessive. I mean, because you could have just written the character as he's a cop or former military, but now working in a civilian life. But that's not what the script does. We have to heighten the drama that he's this ex-con and he's in handcuffs, and we're taking him back to the United States because he did something really terrible, which we never really find out what that is. and so it's like we're heightening the drama and stakes only to give credence to he's good with a gun. That's other than that, there's no real conclusion to it, which I just find kind of hilarious. And maybe that's part of the sleight of hand with this film on the whole. But, that aside, though, I guess I say that to say there are things here that pull the rug out from under you a little bit. And I say that as a good thing. I kind of appreciate those little things. I appreciate that Brody is not really in the action all that much. That is, his priority is on the passengers and coming up with a plan to escape this island. And even what we see at the end, it isn't this moment of glory where they repair the plane and he's able to take off and they fly all the way back to the United States and everything's grand. No, it's heroin. It's kind of it's tense. They don't get very far, and it plays out in this certainly cinematic and obviously heightened way, but also there's an element of pragmatism to it that I just did not anticipate. But I did like that.
Yeah. Having Mike Coulter's character do a lot of the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, in terms of the action, is a good move. Keeping Brody as the everyday man caught in this insane situation, but also allowing Gerard Butler to his character to be like, his priority, which he does in action and also states outright, is the safety of the passengers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very noble way to portray and write that character, so that it allows, I think, the viewer to connect to him a little bit more, to say, look, he's just trying to do the right thing, and he's glad that he has this experienced individual next to him to help, and then it's interesting when you contrast that with the guerrillas and the lead of this terrorist guerrilla group, whatever they are. A very hand wavy enemy. Once again, hearkening back to those 80s, early 90s action films that have vaguely racist others.
It definitely is an 80s film in that way.
Yeah. So the whole idea of the island and the area that they're in, and how the government doesn't want to even bother with this because it's too difficult of a situation, and the how and the who is just, once again, very hand wavy, very very glossed over, which makes the enemy, you're not looking at a very well drawn characterization like Hans Gruber or anything like that. You're looking at somebody
very
who's
one note.
Very exactly one note. So, which is fine for a film of this length and what what they're going for.
It's not trying to be Die Hard. We're not. I mean, there is some emphasis on character, but it's not going out of its way. And you're right. The politics here, very murky. a little murky, that is for sure. And so it definitely has that 80s feel to it for sure. But I do like, again, treating this film for what it is, how it has that sleight of hand at times, and that camaraderie between Brody and Lewis, I do think is interesting because of that pragmatism that is there. And I do like with Lewis that while he has this ability to fight and he's willing to help Brody in this situation, he's also not above himself to just look out for him individually, which is why I love how that character crystallizes, where it's, okay, I helped you, but I'm just going to do me now.
Yeah.
And again, I love that dynamic. And then, we briefly talked about it a moment ago, but all the stuff that's happening back at the headquarters of this company that is in charge of the plane. Again, a little stocky, but I do like some of the drama that's there and the back and forth banter. I love when Scarsdale shows up there and the first thing he does is berate the employee that gave the green light for them to fly through.
Right.
I just thought that was really great too. Like, he's there, understands what is happening, and doesn't give a shit. Like, he's just going to do his thing. And I kind of love that brazenness about the character.
Yeah. He's a fun character. He every once in a while when they go back to him, I was reminded of the movie Air Force One, when Glenn Close is meeting with the cabinet members, and just the back and forth of how do we handle this situation? What's the rule book? Because his character is also needing to get ahead of the media firestorm that's about to get on top of the situation, and he has to write the narrative, if you will, get ahead of the narrative, and so it's something that you wouldn't have seen back in the 80s or 90s, because social media and media coverage in itself is just so different nowadays. And so you have to look at the image of the company, the image of the people involved, and the who to blame. So obviously he's going to blame that guy that he said he was berating before. So it's an interesting dynamic to enter into there, and maybe it just pads the runtime a little bit, just
we got to get it to 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Just, add a little bit more to the meat to the bone, but otherwise, it's once again, like a lot of other things in this movie, isn't completely fleshed out. Doesn't need to be either, because it's simply an action film for action film's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think it adds a little bit to this movie, because we do know that companies, like, there are crisis management teams that these companies have to deal with, and of course they always publicly have a face that comes out and says what you expect them to say, when behind the scenes there's all kinds of panic and chaos. Of course, there are teams doing that. This is condensed to like 3 people, for cinematic sake or whatever. But I agree. It could have been fleshed out more, but this was just concerned about getting us from A to Z and doing it in an entertaining way, which I think it mostly succeeds at. What did you think about that final rescue sequence at the end and how all that kind of played out?
I appreciate that they have this mercenary group going to help them out. These former military personnel or whatever that. And because they know what they're doing, they know how to handle a gun, they know how to handle this type of situation. And I appreciate there's no other contrivances in terms of the dynamic of that team and how they are interacting with the passengers or Brody or Gaspar. That's Mike Holder's name, I think. And it's just getting the situation done, and they're very matter of fact, and they even though they do mention at the start of their introduction the aspect of money, and how much are they going to be making or stuff like that, which is fine, but it doesn't hamper the situation, doesn't cloud the situation during the mission or anything like that. So they just do the job, and it's nice that this movie is filled mostly with competent people doing their best at what they are needed to do. Like even like we had mentioned, the co-pilot, he actually has things to do. It's not like he's a part of this helpless crew. He tries to fix the tracking beacon or whatever it is.
He's kind of pivotal,
absolutely,
from a plot perspective, anyway.
Yes. So everybody has a little bit to do. Everybody essentially does it competently. Even this passenger who's forced to ride a bus later on in the movie is just does what's needed to be done. Kind of like any other civilian caught in a catastrophic situation, stepping up to his game, his or her game. So it's even the one of the flight attendants, she's attending to people's needs or injuries as best as possible. It's nice to see a movie where, for the most part, people don't get in one another's way due to ego, due to other mental faults, if you will. So
well, and it's interesting what you're saying there about this unofficial military group that comes in there at the end, because we've certainly heard lots of things about this over the last decade or so in the news and on social media, because the political landscape is obviously a little, you have to be diligent when navigating those waters. And they even state that because of the politics of the region and simply because of resources, they can't get to the island for another 24 hours. But what they can do is hire a group of, I don't know what you call them, mercenaries, unofficial, former military personnel, I guess. But they can go in on behalf of the company and kind of start the rescue process. And how they're involved there, I think, is interesting because it allows the Brody character, as we talked about earlier, he doesn't have to be the action hero here. He can just be a commercial pilot. And we do learn about him that he also comes from the military, but as a pilot. That doesn't necessarily mean that he has the same training or the same abilities to take on this guerrilla unit that they're up against. We do see him in the, a couple of times in the fight where, he's capable of defending himself. But what I like about this extra military group that his company hires is that he can just focus on being the pilot, trying to get everyone home safely. And that's what he does, and he doesn't have to be front and center in the gunfight. Really, outside of the scene I mentioned where he has to defend himself, where he's mostly in the fight once again, is when he's in the cockpit and there's a moment of violence, we'll say, at the very end of the film regarding his plane. Like that's him jumping back into the four-way there a little bit. So, I do like how, it certainly speaks to the murky politics of this film by having this extra military group come in, but it allows Brody to, he doesn't have to be like a conventional stock character of what we would think that this character could be, given that Gerard Butler is playing him, because he's really not. I mean, he's not formidable in this film the way that we see with others, such as Lewis or this extra military group that comes in. So I do like how all of that plays out. And as we talked about earlier, when he is in the plane at the end and having to pilot there, I do love the sense of urgency at play, and the, maybe a little bit contrived for sure, but
sure. But you got to have that rousing climax, the rousing moment at the end of the film.
But I do like that the plane is banged up. It's not as if it's magically fixed and they can fly back all the way home. And I feel like it would have been easy to write that, and a lot of other movies probably would. But this is like, no, we can get maybe 50 miles and then this thing's dead. And so that's
when you are able to on two instances in this movie, at the beginning, at the end, when you're able to hearken memories of the Denzel Washington movie Flight at the opening of that movie, you're doing a good job. I think you're doing a good job, and this movie is serviceable on a number of fronts.
My last final thought, or I guess we can transition to final thoughts. This will be mine, and then I'll certainly toss it to you. Is that as much as I enjoyed this movie, the one thing I probably could have done without, this is where I'll genuinely criticize the script here. The dynamic between him and his daughter probably you could have underwritten that a little bit more, I think. I mean, that to me is kind of where I rolled my eyes the most, because it's trying to manufacture this pathos that is just not earned, because we don't spend a lot of time with those characters. No. The only, any emotion that is felt is just the inherent fact that it's a father and daughter, which a lot of us can relate with, having that dynamic. But cinematically speaking, it's just so ridiculous. Like everything else, I feel like they've done this movie tried to do its best to take what is, you have this premise. At times it can be a little excessive, but we're throwing in a little pragmatism. We're kind of restraining things where we can while also having a lot of fun. And then the father-daughter dynamic, I feel like, is where they throw all of that into the trash can. And we're trying to do something more, we're trying to do something conventional in terms of getting emotion out of the audience. And that to me is where this film fails the most. It's a small sliver of the film, so ultimately it doesn't hinder the overall experience all that much. But that to me is where I was like, okay, let's just cut that out.
Pretty interesting that the father-daughter dynamic is handled better in a movie like Geostorm than it is in this movie.
That's where we'll give Geostorm credit.
There you go. Look, I agree with a lot of that you've said. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this, for a movie that I don't think is asking a lot of its audience. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those movies that you would have found on basic cable, running on, every weekend or something like that for a few weekends straight, and would have been a great time. It would have been a great time, I think this, the director, the actors, everybody involved know exactly what they're in. And for the, although you talk about contrivances, what's really amusing is there's that scene where we referenced it already, that he has to defend himself. He's trying to make a phone call. It's pretty funny that he gets the wires correct for this landline and remembers the number. He has the customer service number for his airline memorized.
Yeah.
So the fact that he can have that memorized as well as his daughter's number memorized, pretty impressive for someone in an airline pilot who has to have a lot of other stuff in his mind. You know,
in 2023, where no one has any phone numbers memorized at all.
Nope.
The customer service line memorized that. I didn't even think about that too much, but that is awfully hilarious. I don't believe you, sir. We're getting crank calls all the time.
It's like that moment in Die Hard when he calls 911 and she thinks it's a crank call.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Do you have any other final thoughts here? I think we've covered the gamut.
Gerard Butler, baby.
Gerard Butler. You know, let's end on Gerard Butler, because I did note this earlier, and then we had that whole conversation, and we didn't talk about his performance here. Where the film, I think, works wonderfully in terms of its emotion. The contrivances of the father-daughter thing doesn't make that didn't work for me. However, that moment of reflection in the plane at the end, I really liked quite a bit. And now this to me is earned because obviously we spend a lot of time with Brody in the film. We see everything that he went through, the potential sacrifice at play when he confronts the guerrillas to give his passengers time to escape. And so because we spend a lot of time with him, and then he has this incredible moment of piloting, to have that moment of reflection there at the end where the camera just lingers on him. I don't think we get any edits there in that moment. It's at least a good 30 seconds, maybe a full minute of him just reflecting on what's happening, a nice little close up. And it's just Butler performing. That's all that it is. And he's so good. He's so good. In a movie like this, again, phone it in, get your money. I wouldn't blame actors for doing that necessarily, but he doesn't do that. Like, he's genuinely great here, very magnetic. And then you get a moment like that where you're reminded that, man, Gerard Butler is actually a really good actor. and I see why people are still drawn to him even all these years later.
I can see what you're saying, and it is a good moment. However, I think it lingers too long and allows for it allows me as the viewer to be taken out of the moment a little bit because of how long it takes, and also how it feels like it's being staged for the moment with the other actors, his co-pilot and a flight attendant come over to check in on him as he's sitting down in that moment of reflection. And the whole moment feels a little too staged. So I think it lingers a little bit long there. And then you have after that on the outer steps of the plane and the camera pans back and up. And up. It's almost like the camera is a plane itself. Oh my
gotta
goodness.
emphasize the plane, man. The movie's called Plane.
Yep. So I mean, I see what you're saying, and he does a good job in the moment, but I think it just lingers a little too long.
Yeah, it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. It is quite extensive, but it's to me that's where that emotion is earned. I appreciate that much more than any other attempt to pull at our heartstrings in the film, which is just very contrived and messy. This one felt a little bit earned, and there's not much that this film is doing from a craft perspective to enhance the experience. I mean, the craft and the overall filmmaking here is, it's pretty conventional for the most part. But this is a moment that I like because it wants to emphasize character and it wants to emphasize performance. And because we had spent the whole film and we understand what was at stake for him, to linger on that for a moment, I appreciate. And maybe it's just the Gerard Butler thing. Maybe you can take the movie out of it and it's just a reminder of how good Butler is as a performer. And maybe that's what I was drawn to more than anything, because as I was watching it, I just kept thinking about how how great he is in this moment. And I was just sitting there thinking, I really want him to do something beyond this little niche that he's carved out for himself, because he is really good. And I just love that moment of performance and in a movie that doesn't really emphasize it all that much. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you look for performance, you should go to a movie like Cop Shop,
Okay.
and that movie, I think, is filled with performances. It certainly enhances a movie that enhances performances, and you want a moment of reflection, a moment of catharsis and genuineness. I swear, Greenland is the perfect mix of that.
Well, I was going to say, because I've heard a lot of great things about Greenland, actually, that it's much better than you would anticipate it as well. So, but yeah. I like Gerard Butler. I enjoyed the movie for what it is. Tim, thanks so much for being here, man. This was a lot of fun.
It was really good to be here. Thank you.
Tell us, as if people have never listened to the show and heard about first-time watchers, everybody knows, the world knows, it's the most popular podcast. But tell us again, first-time watchers, where can we find you guys, and how can I convince you to continue on after 500 episodes?
Look, I've counted down. We have 22 episodes to go. We're at like episode 477 or something like that, and I am counting down the days until episode 500, and it's been a great run. But first time watchers will be coming to a close, and you will be you have already passed us in terms of episode numbers.
That's because you guys take breaks, though.
A few years ago we started taking breaks, and for the better, I think. For the better.
I understand.
Not for us, for everybody else. It's good for everybody else too. But first time watchers, just search for it on any a podcatcher. You can find us on Twitter for as long as that website is up, at 1ST Time Watchers. You can look for me on Instagram if you want, I guess. But yeah, it's been a good run.
Are you going to continue to Twitter and Instagram after episode 500?
Look, I have to find a way to harass you, JD.
Okay, I was going to say, I just thought it was really funny that you're like, we got 20 episodes to go. Let's start Instagram now.
Look, when the demise of Twitter is imminent, I got to find another place.
Yeah, and who knows with that platform, it could be the beginning of the end there. But at any rate, go follow First Time Watchers. Go check out their show. You got almost 500 episodes. Go check out the whole back catalog. Really good stuff. I've been on a number of episodes, so you can go and check all that out. But yeah, I really do appreciate you, Tim, for being here. And we'll definitely get you back, because the world just isn't the same when you're not on the microphone. So even after 500, if I can't convince you to keep going, you'll just have to start a new show here. That's only the Tim and Brendan show.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see. We'll see how that entices me to keep going.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's the answer there. So, at any rate, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Of course, you can follow us on social media as well: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere you can. Every social media platform out there. Email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our thoughts. I'll have some stuff up at Letterboxd as well that you can go and check out. This was a lot of fun. We'll get Tim back. We'll start the Tim and Brendan show later on this summer, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Go see Plane. It's fun.
Ruben to the music. I don't listen this long. I've never heard this.
Membership fees apply after free trial. Cancel anytime.
Can I be real for a second? That goal you have to exercise and eat better, You really can do it, but nobody is going to do it for you. And nobody has to, because you can do it if you have the right tools and a community that cares about helping you get results. And that's us, Beachbody. It's as convenient as your TV or laptop, but you need to decide that you're worth it. Let us help you succeed. Here's how. Go to beachbody.com to claim your free membership and start feeling great.